A sinkhole is going to be created when your candle does not settle evenly, and what happens is it caves in on itself and it creates a hole within your candle. There's 5 key reasons that I could give and want to share with you on how you can prevent those. So the first tip that I would give you starting off is to control your room temperature. If it's on the warmer side, that part is okay, but the issue that you're going to run into is when it's too cool. Personally, I keep mine definitely no cooler than 70 degrees, because what's going to happen is that cold air is going to surround that candle and it's going to cause parts of the candle to form sooner than others. And whenever that happens, it's going to be uneven, and that's going to cause tunneling. Definitely control your environment when all possible, and that way you can make sure that they're not going to be too cool when they get ready to form. So the second tip that I want to give you in ways that you'll be able to prevent sinkholes is making sure that you're properly stirring your candles. And the reason that it's important to get a slow and gentle stir when you're stirring those two is if you go too fast, you're going to create bubbles or air within your candle. If you remember in the previous tips, I always tell you whenever you're getting ready to add your wax, you definitely want to make sure that you have a warm pitcher, because that's going to prevent your wax from cooling off quicker than it should. Alexa, set a timer for 2 minutes.
2 minutes, starting now.
Look at this kind of like the way that you would of stirring coffee. You don't want to stir it too fast because it'll make a mess and then it won't mix properly. Just from experience, I can tell you there's a big difference from when you stir this fast versus slow, because the faster that you stir, you'll even be able to see the bubbles as they start to form. That's what you don't want to happen. So it may take you a little bit more time, but if you're trying to get a quality candles, this is definitely a key piece to make sure you remember. Alexa, stop. Even here, you'll see that I'm slowly transferring over to prevent those bubbles. But now you want to make sure that this first pour is controlled. You don't want to be too high from it or too far away, because that's going to create more bubbles. So if you can see, there are small bubbles there that will eventually create your sinkholes. So when you think about the first pour, I want you to think of it kind of like you would pouring champagne. If you pour champagne in a glass, it is going to eventually bubble, and sometimes it'll foam over. Your candle is not going to foam over, but it is going to create those bubbles. So if you can control that pour, that will help eliminate that, and then you just follow up with it with a simple toothpick. This is a skewer that you can get from any grocery store, but you go in and you pop the bubbles that have came up to the surface. Once you really get good at this, you should be able to eliminate bubbles, especially if you're pouring in small batches. So now that we have controlled our room temperature, we have controlled the stirring when we add our fragrance and wax together, we have made sure that we had a slow and steady first pour to prevent adding any additional bubbling to it. The next part is going to make sure that you have an even surface to allow your candles to rest on. Look at the importance of leaving these on a flat surface, also the same way that you would a foundation of a house. If you have a house and the foundation is uneven, as pretty as it may look, eventually over time, it is going to eventually settle unevenly. And that's the same way that your candle is going to do. So find you an even flat surface where if you are moving, your candle is not going to move every time that you move with it. All right, so last but not least is to keep these stored in a low traffic area. If you've ever been in a household with parents and tell you, hey, I'm baking, don't walk in the kitchen because it's going to cause my cake to fall, that's the same thing. If there's a lot of moving, the wax is going to eventually start to shift as well. And as it slowly shifts, it's eventually going to become uneven. This is the studio that we have dedicated to everything candle related. So after these have poured, I will not move much on this table. And even if I'm walking back and forth, I'm honestly stepping lightly. So sending them in an area that you're not going to be coming across a lot is definitely going to help. If that's not your situation, if that's not your setup, You should try to make it where you can get them away from everyone. And even if it's not a dedicated space, you want to make sure that the space is even. But most importantly, you don't want to have a lot of people that's moving because it's going to impact the overall settling of your candle. So to give you a recap of 5 things that you can do to prevent sinkholes from happening in your candles. 1, you need to make sure that you control your room temperature. Our recommendation is to have it between 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Next is to make sure that you are stirring properly. So when you're adding your fragrance and your wax together, you want to give a slow stir for at least 2 minutes. Third part is first pour. Remember your first pour the same way you would as if you're pouring champagne. Whenever you have poured your candles, allow your jars and your wax to sit in an even, flat surface. Last and definitely not least, make sure that as your candles sit, you store them away in an area that has low traffic. All of those will have an impact on how your candle overall solidifies and also ends up performing. If you can stay consistent with this and you follow all of these steps, then you should limit the possibility of your candle still tunneling. So for the community that we've built, you see benefit in it. If any of this is helping you, if any of this makes sense, give it a like, a comment, and also more importantly, share it with somebody else, because the reason that that's important is it lets me know that this is starting to connect and it's starting to resonate with you. So I know that these tips work. I know that they have worked for me because it's a part of the process that we follow over and over again. I want to make sure that I'm giving value back out to you all. So visit us at www.mmcandles.net. Everything from our candles, our sprays, our wax melts, all of it is there. And that is the best way for you to be able to see if what we're teaching is actually effective. So until the next time, y'all stay motivated.